Hey, I just wanted to do a quick little video. I see a lot of questions asked all across social media and the internet about deer antlers and how they're scored. And I know some people don't care about score, but it is what it is, and scores are out there everywhere. Everybody's spouting out scores. And I know a lot of people may not understand that, and some people may not want to ask the question because people are terrible about shaming people on social media. Well, one of the main things is people don't know what they don't know, and I'll never hold that against someone. And I always want to help teach or mentor anybody that I can about things. So let's just look at a couple of deer I have laying here. Just we're gonna use skull mounts, a whole lot easier than wall mounts to move around here. People in different regions or parts of the country, they use different lingo when they're talking about deer. So I'll try to go through some of that lingo so you might understand what they're talking about. So if we look at a typical, this is a typical 8 point. Um, if we talk about this, now this is a G1, an eye guard, a brow tine, and some people just call it a 1. Now these are all, I'm guessing Boone and Crockett were the first ones to name these. So if you hear different lingo talking about these, that's what they are. You have a G2. Remember, this is your G1, G2. This will be your G3. Now, this is a typical 8, so he does not have a G4. If we talk about measurements, so this is where a lot of people get confused on terminology because people use acronyms or different terminology, what they're talking about when they're talking about measurements of a deer. So let's start with, one of the measures is tine length. So we have to measure the tine length on our G1s, our G2, and our G3 on this deer on both sides. So you have a right and a left side on your score sheet. 1, 2, 3. Okay, got that. Now we do that to both sides, left and right. Now, when people start talking about circumference measurements, they're talking about mass measurements, and that is the circumference around the antlers at certain points that are designated by Boone and Crockett, Buckmasters, Pope and Young, whatever organization. And they're typically going to be your first mass measurement, C1, circumference, mass 1, what somebody calls it. That's going to be around the base, not on the burr, but around the base, between the 1 and 2, between the 2 and 3. And then some people get confused if it's just a typical 8 like this and they don't have a 4. They say, oh, they don't get that fourth mass measurement. Well, they absolutely do. So what you have to do is measure from the point on the main beam back to your G3, and dead in the middle is where you'll get that fourth mass measurement. Every whitetail buck is going to get a fourth mass measurement, whether they're 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, it doesn't matter. So we have mass and we have tines. Then we talk about main beams. So main beams are going to be back here from the burr, and you have to wrap it around, come all the way to the tip, and that is your main beam length. You'll see that as MB1 or MB right and MB left, main beam measurements, tip to the back of the burr. The only other measurement is our inside spread. And so what you have to do, and like I said, we can do a more advanced video on this where I show you, because there's things like you have to know where to mark the tines on this main beam to measure from. You can't measure to the bottom of the beam. There's certain points that you have to line or tape using a Nomar tape or something. And I like to use a core tape or a steel flex tape, not a big carpenter tape. If I'm really trying to get detailed, I use a cable or some kind of string that I can actually wrap around and tape to the antler if we're really, really trying to get that down in eighths. The inside spread, so what I do is take the core tape, whatever, and you got to keep it parallel across these main beams here. And I'll take that and I slide that back until I find the actual largest measurement between those main beams. Remember, that's inside, it is not an outside spread measurement. So that's basically all your measurements. Now, when they're talking about gross and net, here's what we're looking at. So I have basically what I call a mainframe 8 with 2 extras, and the 2 extras being the split on his 2 and this dagger that comes off the bottom of his main beam. So if I measured this deer, he would be measured as a typical 8, but then I would measure, because this would be my main point, so this would be the one I'd be getting my tine length out of, and then I would measure this one at the split wherever I drew that off as just an extra growth, and then measure the full from the beam all the way up to the tip of this dagger. And I would get a gross score combined. Everything that he grew would be measured out in a gross measurement. But then, according to Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, we have to come back and we have to have deductions. So anything he's measured to see how symmetrical he is as a typical deer. So if I had to, and we're just calling him a typical deer, I would have to deduct this 2 inches or whatever this is, and I would have to deduct this 8 or 9 inches off this dagger off the gross score. So once I had a total combined gross score of the whole buck with everything he grew, then I would have to minus, say, this 8 and this 2, 10 inches off of him to give my net score. And I hope that's clear as mud. To me, I'm not big on deductions. And I hear a lot of people say nets are for fishing. And I will agree. If the buck grew it, I'm giving it to him. So I hope that explains. If you want a more detailed video on scoring or anything like that, just let me know.